This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Detroit is the greatest!
Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back with Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
What up, everybody? It is another edition of the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. With me, as always, my good friend, my host, the guy with all the phones, John, the Doc Macaroon. What up, dude?
It's great to see you, Jason. It's always good to have you come into the studio and do a recording of the Motor City Sports Rant. It's always great. Hope everything's been going well with you over this past weekend.
Yeah, it was celebrated my first Father's Day.
Congratulations.
So it was a good weekend. Had a lot of fun with the kid, with the family. But we have another guest in studio. It's the first time in a while we've had a third chair in here. And I want to welcome in Editor-in-Chief of The Athletic, Craig Custance. How's it going, sir?
It's going great. It's going awesome. Thanks for having me in here. This is exciting.
The Athletic,
I love the setup.
The Athletic just launched today, right?
It did, like literally this morning.
Just this morning. You flipped on the lights.
Yeah.
And everyone flocked to you, right?
Well, yeah, so far it's been overwhelming. Honestly, last night I didn't sleep well at all. You never know when you're taking a leap like this what the response is going to be, especially when you're talking about subscription model, paywalls, stuff that people get a little bit nervous about on the internet. But the people of Detroit have been unbelievable. I mean, you guys should see the emails I'm getting, and Twitter's just blown up. And the city is, I think they're ready for something like this.
So tell the listeners a little bit about what The Athletic is. Yeah,
in a nutshell, The Athletic, Detroit is the fourth city. It's a subscription-based app and website for sports news. And essentially, we are trying to do something that's different than the local media. We're going to have a staff covering all the games and all the teams, but we're not doing the traditional game stories, traditional notebooks, that kind of thing. We're really going to try to find some deep dive analysis, find writers who excel at telling different stories than people normally get. And I've watched it work exceedingly well in Chicago, Cleveland, Toronto, with a pretty interesting mix of your traditional writer, and sometimes you have bloggers, sometimes you have film breakdown guys. It's like the place where everybody goes. If they have a unique story to tell and a unique way to do it, then they're finding a home and an audience.
The reason why I found your story so fascinating was it appears that you were going into it, you were a journalist, a writer, you've had a lot of great, jobs, great things covering the NHL and great work. But then you started noticing the trends in your field, and you started realizing, wow, each and every day or each and every month you started hearing rounds and rounds of layoffs. People weren't secure in the journalistic field, and you started realizing, okay, maybe there's an opportunity to try and do my own thing if I can do quality work. Tell us a little bit about the theory about why you wanted to start your own project.
Really, I joined ESPN 6 years ago, and it was my dream job. Like, I was, part of a hockey group with Pierre LeBrun, Scott Burnside, Katie Strang at the time, Joe McDonald, Scott Powers now in Chicago at the Athletic Chicago. And it was unbelievable. And we had this great team of writers. And I'm like, oh, this is what I'm going to do forever. Like, I found it. And ESPN is the destination. Like, where do you go from here?
It's every sports person's dream.
It was like it was my dream job. I got every break you needed to get there. It was awesome, and I loved it until my final day 2 weeks ago or whatever it was, 3 weeks ago. But you're right. You start to see trends, and I saw what happened. We've all talked about the layoffs at ESPN. Over around 100 people got laid off, and thankfully I wasn't part of it. But everybody around me, especially in the hockey crew, was, and it made me really think really hard about the model and what works and what fans want. And fans really crave really good local coverage. And maybe even more so than national coverage, I would say. And this the founders, it's a Silicon Valley group, The Athletic, and they reached out, and I was certainly attentive to what they made a great pitch, and I'm completely on board, obviously.
Now you're an East Side guy?
Yeah. I grew up in Sterling Heights. My wife is from Grosse Pointe, and I'm a Michigan State grad. So yeah.
What high school?
Grosse Pointe. She's from South.
Oh, she's South.
Are you North?
No. I'm in East Detroit, man.
Oh, okay, nice.
No,
Yeah.
all of us here, East Side guys, and we started this podcast project. Did you always know around the time when you got to high school or when you entered Michigan State that you wanted to be a writer or a writer/journalist?
Yeah, for sure. I went to Michigan State. Was a journalism major there. Great school. I didn't know if I wanted to get into print or TV or radio, so I did a little bit of everything at Michigan State, thankfully, because by the time I graduated, you had to do all of it. I mean, you guys know it. So you're writing, you're podcasting,
Right.
you're on, I at the end, doing Sports Center, like whatever you need. You can't just do one thing, and Michigan State was great for that. I thought I was going to be a baseball writer, and went down to Atlanta to the Journal-Constitution and dove into it there and talked to a lot of the baseball writers and saw that may be the hardest job in sports media is a baseball beat writer. I saw firsthand like how long they're gone and the challenges, and I've got a wife and now 3 kids, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could just be a baseball fan and once I got into the hockey world, it was just a great fit. Like I know it's a niche sport. I'm coming from ESPN where hockey wasn't at the top of the food chain, but the hockey world itself is unbelievable in terms of developing sources and relationships with players, management, fans. It's just this tiny world that I really loved and enjoyed, and it really just took off from there.
Now, earlier this year, I don't know if you got caught up in the whole Darren Ravel kind of situation where he was kind of talking about a little bit about kind of the journalistic field and breaking into it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he said that sparked a nationwide debate and everybody talked about it was like, look, he was kind of commenting on, coverage about using AP writing. And he had said, look, why would you use, an AP writing situation when maybe you could offer the job to somebody for free and maybe get yourself noticed by doing free work? Mm-hmm. And then it kind of kicked off this debate about, sites, fields, companies kind of using journalists in a way that maybe, is taking advantage of journalists. What was your take on that? And do you feel like potentially that journalists/writers are being really taken advantage of in some situations in the field that you're in?
Whew, there's a lot there to unpack. I would say there's no one path, right? And it's funny, like I'll go back to Michigan State and I'll speak to a class and they'll say, oh, how did you get where you are? And I'll tell them how I got there. And that path doesn't exist anymore. Like you're not going to go to a major metro in a city and do the prep speed and work your way up. Like that world doesn't exist. Those jobs aren't there. I think if you have a strong voice at 21 and you have a blog and you have a different way to tell stories, do it and get your voice out there, get heard. It's going to be different for everyone. Thank God I didn't have to at 21 because I was a horrible writer at 21.
Do you think interns should be paid?
Do I think? Yeah, I think writing. I mean, look, I'm working for a paywall subscription model. I think all writers should get paid, and I also know that's not always realistic. And so I'm not one to judge paths because I just think, like you'll see when we fill out the staff at the Athletic Detroit, you're going to see we're going to have some very traditional names you recognize. Okay, this person came up through that route that we all know, and you're also going to see this person came from the blog and is completely non-traditional. And I think there's room for everybody at that table.
So with the Athletic Detroit, it's going to be everything based Detroit. What are your goals? Are you looking to just really focus on the 4 major sports, or are you going a little bit out? Are you going Michigan State, and even into the colleges? Yeah,
we'll go definitely Michigan State to start, and I think we're going to go wherever the audience kind of demands it. And I wrote a welcome letter today and just said, I asked if you're subscribing, the next thing I want you to do is email me and let me know what you want to read about and who do you enjoy reading. And if you're paying the $5 a month, you're my boss now. It's not. There's no other way to do it. There's no middleman anymore. Like the sports fan is the reader, is the boss here. So if they're saying, "Hey, I'm really interested in Wayne State football or something," nobody covers that really well, and we start doing it, and people like, I'll go wherever the people demand. And
that's definitely it's totally different than anything you get at ESPN or even just the local papers.
Yeah.
You get what you're dictated by the fans.
100%. And look, and I think part of that is I've in really reading the emails today, there's some frustration from the fan bases, and I've been there as a writer, but they feel like sometimes the writers are beholden to the teams, you're beholden to access, and I have to deal with it on a daily basis. You're not going to crush the person that you have to go interview the next day. There's a fine line, but I think what this market really is looking for is some honesty and having a voice, and we really are hoping to provide that.
Now, what was your first writing experience after college?
Oh, going back. So yeah, I graduated from Michigan State. You guys know how it is at school. Like you have the people that are the super ambitious, like they have a million internships, and I was like the opposite. Like I waited tables in the summer and realized I was graduating and didn't have anywhere to go. And just on a fluke, there's a woman named Shannon Shelton who now works at the University of Dayton, had an internship at Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She was the person that did everything right. She lined that up months in advance. Was unbelievable. Had worked at the news and did a million things and it was great. And she just let me know someone dropped out at the last second in the internship at the AJC in Atlanta. And she's like, you should apply now. And I had somebody make a couple phone calls on my behalf, and just fluke, right? Like you need those breaks along the way. And
I know when I got into radio, it really just kind of was I started at Detroit Sports 105.1, which unfortunately folded. But I knew Tom Manslaway, one of the executive producers there, who my wife actually coached his daughters in volleyball. Right. And I was like, oh, hey, I kind of want to get into sports radio. And he's like, yeah, come on, just, intern 5 days a week. And I got in and I got my break into radio. I mean, would you say that a lot of getting into the business, even nowadays, it's kind of about luck?
Oh my gosh. It's two things. It's getting that break and then capitalizing. Like once I got into Atlanta, I realized what a break it was and was do whatever they wanted. I got in as like a web producer, but I was like, look, my dream is to write. And so you need somebody at that cross country meet 5 hours away. I'll get in my car right now. And so it's then capitalizing and it's having that break. But it was the same thing for me. It was like my internship coordinator at Michigan State worked at the Free Press with the person in charge of interns in Atlanta. And it was all these lines that were connected. But I mean, I guess that's the same way in any business, right? Or you're hired because of networks. And I mean, and every job I got was not because it was posted. It was because I knew, I had a relationship with the editor or whatever moving forward.
At the time you were covering the Thrashers, what was it like in that market? Because here in Hockeytown, I mean, we absorb a lot of information from a lot of different sources. We know, Jason and I and all the staff here, we know, the hotbed of hockey here in Hockeytown. What's it like covering the Atlanta Thrashers in that market? Because most people think like towns like LA, towns like Atlanta, sometimes maybe aren't the hotbed of sports, and especially hockey in Atlanta.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I mean, it was, but for me, so I got that job. That was my first professional sports beat, was covering the Atlanta Thrashers, and it was really a great way to break in because it wasn't so high profile. Like I could screw up, and it was okay.
But you're not covering the Montreal Canadiens.
I'm not covering the Montreal Canadiens or the New York Rangers or the Detroit Red Wings, but at the same time, it was great for networking and working in a room because there wasn't a ton of media, so you could develop relationships. Every interview was a one-on-one, the kind of access you just don't get anymore. And that benefited, even after I left Atlanta, the relationships I made with players and people in the front office and the training staff, stuff that I probably wouldn't have been able to do in a more traditional market. I mean, that paid off for years, still does. I called somebody today that was with the Thrashers organization, that's a source, and it was a great place to start, and it was a great place to develop that network. By
all accounts, everybody that talks about hockey guys will rave about just they're cool dudes, easy to talk to, and if you get a chance to build a relationship with a hockey player, it really is worthwhile because overall, most hockey players are nice guys.
They are. I mean, you hate to paint with a broad stroke. There's, I'm sure other sports are nice guys, but I in Atlanta got an opportunity to cover all the sports, and just the hockey players they're super down to earth, and you've seen the Swedes are the nicest guys in the world, and the Canadians are super polite, and all the kind of cliches that we make are true for the most part. Yeah, you don't feel I remember in Atlanta, like when I was covering the team, I was driving an old Ford Ranger that was like 10 years old, and I'm parking in the players' lot next to their Mercedes, and but they never would give me a hard, it was because they were driving those 5 years previous,
Were the Atlanta Thrasher jerseys the worst NHL jersey ever?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you have any gear from them still?
I just switched my Twitter picture today with the job change, but right before my son had a Thrashers jersey, the They weren't attractive. I'll grant you that. But it brings back a good memories. I mean, how many people have a Thrashers jersey?
Yeah, right.
My favorite thing ever was when I was covering them, Chris Chelios signed, I don't know if he signed or was traded, I've long forgotten, played like 15 games for the Thrashers randomly at the end when he was hanging on at the end. And they had St. Patrick's Day where they had the warm-up jerseys. So they have a green Thrashers Chris Chelios jersey that they're auctioning. And I'm thinking, I'm like, I should be buying this right now because where else in the world are you going to find a Chelios green Atlanta?
You could send that to the Hockey Hall of Fame.
I'm sure maybe it's there. I don't know.
Now, you said early on you made some mistakes. What were some of the common mistakes a young journalist makes on the beat covering the Atlanta Thrashers?
Oh, that's a great question. I think my biggest challenge was finding the balance between writing for the casual sports fan in Atlanta who didn't know a lot about hockey and the diehard hockey fan who maybe was a transplant from Detroit or Pittsburgh or New York. And so, there'd be days I'd have to write the story, what happens to the hats when they get thrown on the ice? And, meanwhile, the power play's over the last 30, and that fan is like rolling their eyes at me. And so that to me was the biggest struggle was trying to placate a couple of different fan groups and realizing that sometimes you're not, you just can't please everybody on every day. I think when you're first starting out, I treaded lightly. I probably wasn't as hard on the team as you don't want to come in and just start crushing people as a 20-year-old or whatever on a beat. And like I look back and like some of those teams were pretty bad. I probably could have been a little harder on them.
Who were some of your mentors growing up, people that you wanted to be like, or some of the role models that you aspired to be like when you got into the working field?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up reading news in the free press and just devouring that. Like, I remember my mom getting mad because I would just spread it out on the floor and like the ink would get all over the carpet. And I loved reading all of that. And every single day, all the same coverage that a lot of the people are still working there. And it was always a thrill to come to Detroit and sit in the press box with some people I grew up reading. In Atlanta, there's a couple of writers there's a writer named Jeff Schultz, who's a columnist, who was the first ever Thrashers beat writer, incredible writer, really funny guy, he can carve a team, but do it in a way that's fair, like he was so helpful. And that's what, you need those mentors, right? That he shared who I need to be reading, who I need to reach out to, don't bother with this guy, call that guy. And it was just so invaluable to me. A guy that, really tucked me under his wing.
Now, what was it like going from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, then becoming the national hockey writer for the Sporting News, 2008? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a big jump. You go from covering one team and now to every single team. And the biggest challenge doing a national beat is having some depth to your coverage, right? Like you're parachuting in. A lot of and the fans, they don't want to hear, the national guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. So I felt the biggest challenge was going in and being able to tell a good story that the fans in that market wanted to read. But the trade off is doing the beat on a national basis is you get a lot of access you might not otherwise get. You get more time with the coaches and the GMs, and that's where I was able to really sit down and dive into things and be able to tell different stories than the people were doing locally. But it takes a while to do that. And it took a while to learn the league. And you're so, the beat writers here will tell you, when you're covering one team, you're the whole, Grand Rapids, the Red Wings, who's a right-hand shot, left-hand shot throughout the whole organization when they were drafted. And when you start to pan out, you've got to learn that for every team. And like that was challenging.
Is there, one beat that or one story that you just broke that you're like, that's my crowning achievement in writing so far, at least?
Yeah. Oh man. I'm trying to think of a good one. I think being in Atlanta, there was a couple, and I was young, and so they probably meant more to me. You guys remember Marian Hossa getting traded at the trade deadline to the Penguins. Having just started the beat, being able to text with Marian, get updates from him. I can tell you, I was sitting in the Montreal at the Marriott there, the Chateau Champlain in Montreal, where the team was staying. I'd set up shop in the lobby because you could see, like, if players got traded or something, they would leave. You'd saw.
Right.
I was basically stalking. Let's be honest here. And so was able to break that trade, which meant a lot because you're competing at that point nationally with other people on deadline day, right? And I'm just a kid starting out, and then was able to kind of get the basics of it, right? You get it in pieces. You don't get the full trade. You get, hey, I've been traded whatever. There's been a trade. I'm going here, or this guy's going there. and then you end up piecing it together. Especially on Twitter, you can see, like I did it the other day. I'm like, here's the trade. Oh, this guy's also in it. Like that's just how it is as you kind of gather information when you're breaking stuff. And so Marion gets traded, and Pascal Dupuis walks into the lobby. He's wearing flip flops and kind of weird because he should have been napping on a game day. And he's on the phone, and I walk over and I'm like, hey, Pascal, did you hear about Marion? Crazy, huh? And he goes, I'm in that trade. And I'm like, oh, hold on. Let me,
good to know.
Hold on, I'll be right back. Let me get on online and try to get that in there. And so I was able to, tack on that little bit of information. And it's just crazy. Like, I love that competitive nature, where you're hunting stuff and trying to get information. And it's so hard now with Twitter because you break it for 30 seconds. Yep. And I know there's fans out there, and I think it's a debate to be had. Like, who cares who breaks what? And maybe it's only the writers that are keeping score, but just the competitor in me, I enjoy doing that stuff.
Are there any players or coaches that got beef with you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anything that you can discuss here?
Man, I'm trying to think of anything that I could share here without getting anyone in trouble. No, because a lot of times you won't hear from them, right? Like, when they're mad because all of a sudden the text isn't
gosh
getting,
darn it, I'm mad at you.
Yeah, the text isn't coming, they're not getting back to you. And
does it involve just the release or critique of bad information that you write in the paper, or is it sometimes where you might have creatively edited something where you might have taken it out of context, or what do you think is the biggest source of athletes' frustration that gets them pissed off with the writer?
I think if you get too personal, like, which I try not to ever do, and I think that's why I've been able to maintain pretty good relationships. I try to do a very honest analysis. Even like, so today we ran a piece on Ken Holland, and I know there's some frustration with the fan base and Ken Holland, and I really just said, and who knows, maybe he doesn't like the story, I don't know, but I just really tried to say, okay, here's what he's doing, here's what his plan looks like, here's my honest opinion of where it can work and where it can't work. I'm not going to take any personal shots. I'm not going to say whatever. I'm not a guy who calls for anyone's head. I just really try to do it very lay it on the table. I try to report it, talk to as many people around as possible, form opinions, and then just be honest with it. Because I think the fan knows if you're just repeating what the source wants you to repeat. I think fans are too savvy for that.
No doubt about it. Now you're talking about sources, and that's kind of one of the topics that has been a hotbed for, I think, the better part now of a couple years. And around town, we can relate that to the whole Jim Harbaugh saga. When he first came to Michigan, you had national writers saying, hey, there's sources telling me that Jim Harbaugh is going to stay in the NFL. Why would he come to Michigan? And then you had the other side that were like, no, we got information. We got sources that are telling us he's coming to Michigan.
Yeah.
And so everybody's kind of talking about the reliability of sources, cultivating sources, or using even the word, hey, I got this information per a source. And just recently, the other day, Stephen A. Smith and Stephen A. Smith was talking about sources and being like, no, put your name on it. Don't be one of those people that says those kind of things. And so what's your opinion on source information that's used in reporting as journalists?
I would like to have everybody go on the record and say, here's what's happening. But if you want to break news, even if you want an honest analysis, and maybe other sports are different, but I can tell you in the hockey world, you're not going to be able to get guys on the record to do it. And, it's if you want to be able to break stuff, if you want to have insight that other people don't have, you're just going to have to say, according to NHL sources, this is going down, or the Red Wings, I'm going to write a story tonight, the Red Wings are in on a player that, who they may be shopping, and people, the GM from another team isn't going to say, hey, go ahead and say, I told you, if you really want the information and you really want to hear what's going on out there, you have to source it that way.
Do you feel like the skill between knowing a source that has an agenda, or maybe trying to tell you information to skew, what you're going to write, or to put things out there with an agenda, do you feel like that comes with experience? And have you been burned by sources that you had to kind of backtrack and be like, look, I got to retract what I said. It was just totally wrong.
I don't think I've ever been I'm conservative on stuff. So just by nature. So I'd rather pass on a scoop than be wrong. And I can tell you, there's no worse sick feeling than breaking a story and then having that 10 minutes where nobody's confirmed it, or no one, because you're like, then you start going, oh my gosh, what if my source is wrong here? And what if, or like, I've had times where I'm like, what if somebody it was a wrong number and then someone was just messing with me, and which is, because I'll tell this story. I've never told. Brian Campbell, defenseman in the league, there was a trade deadline or a free agency where he was the big guy, and I had an old number for him in my phone that I didn't know was old. So I'm texting, hey, I hear you're, Mike. Oh, it's just really recently. I'm like, I hear you might go back to Chicago on a discount. Oh yeah, but don't count out Buffalo. Love the Sabres. And I'm like, boy, that's doesn't add up. That's not what I text back again. I said, the Sabres, Buffalo's the best. Sabres number one. And I'm like, really didn't add up to anything. Didn't make sense for the Sabres. And then finally I checked with someone else that I knew, I'm like, hey, is this the best number for Brian Campbell? And they're like, no, that number is 3 years old. And so then I text back and the guy's like, let's try to see if I could get you. But like that would have been a disaster if I came out and said, hey, Sabres, Campbell leaning towards the Sabres. And so you got to be so careful with this stuff.
So now it's 2011. It's not too often we have somebody who has worked at ESPN in our midst. So what's the process like going from the sporting news to ESPN? Did they court you? Did you put out feelers? Or how does, Craig get to ESPN?
Yeah. So the beauty of being at Sporting News it was really trying to, they gave me all the resources I ever would have needed to travel anywhere, to go anywhere. They were really trying to reestablish themselves as a national brand, and I completely benefited from it. I was at every GM's meetings, every Stanley Cup final. And, you develop those relationships, but you're also able to do your job really well. And because of that, ESPN was looking, EJ Raddick had left. He had worked for the magazine and gotten hired by NHL Network. They had an opening there, and I had relationships with people there. And actually, somebody from Atlanta that was kind of in management. And so we sat down, and I remember having a dinner in Boston covering I forgot what Stanley Cup final, Bruins, Canucks, whatever year that would have been, with editor at ESPN, and it just went from there.
One interview or two?
We did one interview, but then after that, and it was like dinner. It was, here's what we're thinking, and it was great. And then after that, it never goes as fast as you want, right? Like it's okay, you get a call a month later, and then when do I tell my current employee? I'm talking to them, and it was, I remember it went well into, I think it was September when I signed, and so we're talking about Stanley Cup. So June to September were conversations where I was fairly confident it was going to happen, but I remember thinking it took way too long for me personally.
Now, we don't have to go into detailed specifics, but what kind of things go into an agreement between a writer and ESPN? Like a number of articles, the job title. What kind of things go into what you're going to do in your role as now an NHL reporter for ESPN?
It was interesting because at the time, this is really like inside baseball, but it was a contract job. We were technically, the writers were freelance, and so it was a day's contract. You worked 200 days, which you blew through halfway through the season. So it became almost like an honor system where, okay, I'm going to blow through my contract, and then give me the summer off. Yeah. And they were great about it. But then I think at some point, HR or somebody's like, it's probably not a good idea to have these guys signed contracts that they're clearly breaking, and so they made us full-time employees in the next one over, and what goes into it, you talk about what their coverage plans are. I think travel for a writer is important, especially at that, how committed to covering things are they, but I was just honored that they were having those conversations with me.
Now, in terms of professional growth, do you sit around like every 3 months and go over some articles that you've written in terms of like, hey, you could have did this in this spot better, or we look for you to kind of advance in these ways? How do you grow as a writer within a system as large as ESPN? Do you have regional editor, or how does that work?
I'm a big, I do two things. I'm a podcast listener, so I do a lot of, leadership podcasts or writing podcasts. And I read a ton of, besides just doing it for my job, reading sports coverage, I read books on writing, and like Stephen King has written a great book on writing that every writer should read. And I'm just a nerd, like I'm a journalism nerd, so I love all that stuff. So yeah, I'm a big personal growth person. That's part of the reason I'm doing this job, is because I was really excited about something new and challenging, and that really got me excited to do something. And it's scary, but that means you're living, right?
Yeah, from the journalists I talk to, either the biggest pain in the ass or the biggest ally you have is your editor. Your working relationships with the editors at ESPN. Did you get fortunate to work with those that were like, look, constructively criticizing, or did you have some challenges dealing with, editors?
No,
they seem to be an interesting breed of people themselves.
No, thankfully, I can tell you my editors were all great. What I liked best was they gave me a lot of autonomy, and there was a lot of trust there, and in terms of what I was going to write and the topic and even length. And I think that builds over time, that trust between a writer and an editor. But I had it with virtually every editor I worked with at ESPN. There's, for the stuff that goes online, there's less editing than I probably would have liked, just because of the nature of the beast. Like the editor has to get through a million stories, and so like the writer in you wants everything to be crafted and let's go over your lead, and sometimes the reality is the workflow, you don't have that, and then when they do change your lead you get mad, so I guess
Everything gets cut.
then you're like, hey, wait, no, don't edit my stuff. Yeah.
Now you're the editor of theathletic.com. What is your role going to be day to day in this website? What are you going to be doing, to enhance the product, and what is your role with The Athletic?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I'm the editor, so right now I'm in the process of hiring writers, editing copy, but also I'm taking on the Red Wings beat at the same time, just because it's my field and I feel like I can do it pretty well, and kind of a control freak. So I'm competitive, so I want to dive into that and kind of establish myself in this market on that beat. And so I'll be writing and reporting Red Wings, hiring staff. After this, I have to go edit a few stories that we're running tomorrow from a couple really good freelancers, because we're still hiring. So we're going to lean on freelancers for the first week or two. It's a little bit of everything, and promoting the work and doing radio and TV and whatever else goes with it.
So do you have one tip that you would give to all those prospective journalists or somebody who's trying to break into this field? What's the one tip that you can give them to make their stuff just stand out above everyone else?
Well, I can. This is fresh in my mind because I'm trying to find writers, and so I can say what I'm telling the people I'm talking to is we're trying to find somebody that is creating unique stories, and that looks a lot of different ways. But it can be film breakdown, it can be an analytic story, it can be a well-sourced story. But my advice to any writer is make sure your voice is distinctive, and try to find a niche that isn't being done or that makes you different. Being the millionth person to weigh in on on Brad Ausmus, your opinion really, it's hard to make it doing that.
It's a little bit.
Right. And I think I'm completely out on hot takes, like all that stuff. I think there was an era where, bloggers, it was probably a good, if you had really strong opinions, it was a good way to kind of make a name for yourself. And writers, certainly not there's a lot of people that are guilty of this. And I just think fans now, with social media and Twitter and clickbait and all that, I think there's people they just want really good stuff that's just not some off the cuff opinion. So if I'm a writer breaking in and I'm looking for these writers in this market, it's do something unique, put the work in, rewatch the game, try to find an element of the game that wasn't broken down well, and do that. And I think fans like it, and I know people looking to hire people like it.
You got smarter fans, so you need smarter writers
for sure. And I can tell you, it's easier just to kind of mindlessly go to the game, write the story, go to the press conference, write what the coach said. I've done it a million times, but that does that makes you you're not indispensable if you're doing that. And if I'm asking, especially with The Athletic, if I'm asking readers to pay for it, it can't be a rewritten press release or a press conference.
See, how do you address those in the field? Because, like you said, you notice trends, and you started noticing like sites like the Detroit News, Free Press, all their writers' stuff is available for free. Mm-hmm. So there's a plethora of information, especially sporting-wise, that we all can consume for free. How do you tackle the notion that, look, if I can get it for free at the Free Press or the News, what is it about, a subscription service that you think can, work? Because a lot of people are used to, and a lot of journalists are saying, look, the reason why we can't continue and thrive in this field is you're giving away our stuff for free. So how do you think a subscription model can potentially change or work given the fact that there is so much free content?
Yeah, it has to be different, and it has to be better. So how that looks is going to depend on the writer. But I had a lunch with a writer today that I really want to hire, and who's being asked to do a lot in terms of production for kind of the traditional thing. You have to churn out a lot, and it's like, okay, how about we scale back? Instead of writing 15 stories in a week, I'm saying give me 5 really good ones, and spend an extra day at reporting it, or finding another voice, or finding an angle. And then I think the fans appreciate that, and it's harder to do, and it's harder to find people that are good at it. But I can tell you, the fans appreciate that, and they want it, and yeah. So that's what I would say. And I believe me, I worked at ESPN. My stuff a lot of stuff was behind the paywall at Insider. I heard anytime I tweeted out, "Hey, why are you doing this? It's behind a paywall. I can get this stuff for free." And I for 6 years, I really made the effort to try to offer something that was different. And fans, you start to get a following. You get to people that say, okay, this person's putting in the extra, they're making the extra couple calls. There's information here I haven't seen elsewhere. It's a higher standard when you're asking people to pay for it.
Did you have to kind of go over all this with the missus and say, look, I got a job at ESPN. It's a good job. But at the same time, if I have the opportunity to do good work, there's value in that. And that's what, working in America is all about. If you do good work, you should expect that the compensation will be there. But inherently, there is risk. Like, hey, I got kids, I got bills to pay. And so I think a lot of times people do have that fear of going into a new project because of the fact of, hey, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
But I tell people, look, at the same time, what if it does hit?
Yeah.
Then I'm now creating my own vision and being a trailblazer in the field of journalism, whereas I can be anybody saying, the field of journalism is whack or there's trouble or things like that. But I went out and created a solution to a problem that I saw.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm scared to death. I don't know. There's no guarantees it works. And, I walked away from a guaranteed contract. And that's a very scary thing. Thankfully, my wife she's unbelievable. She's supportive. I would say the biggest thing they're upset about is working for ESPN. You get free Disney passes, and I've got it in my pocket still. Like it's a wonderful thing. You just scan your thumb and you walk right through the gates.
Did you grab any free Disney World passes on the way out?
Yeah. They let us. You accumulate PDFs of tickets over the years. So I was scurrying to print those up because everyone says what they want about ESPN. I loved my time there. I love working for Disney. We took advantage of it as a family. So that was. My wife is completely on board with it, but she's like, "Oh man, we have to pay full price to go to Disney now."
So obviously,
a lot of money.
It's a lot of dough. I don't know how. I'm looking at people. I'm like, how do you come?
You
have
to spend. You have to save up for an entire year.
Yeah, and now
Maybe not more.
No, I know. And some of my kids are like, they're just used. Let's go on. I'm like, you guys have gone 3 times in 3. I went once in 20 years of my life. You guys, this isn't how it works.
So, obviously a lot of people do not do what you're doing. What was it for you that said, okay, I'm going to take that leap of faith and try to create something, even though there's no guarantee that it's going to work?
I don't know. I think being, it's certainly ignited the passion I think having a little bit of uncertainty in what you're doing is probably a good thing. And, I have a book coming out in the fall, and one of the things, the whole premise of the book is I sat down with 10 coaches and we watched the game. They won the Stanley Cup together. Or in Mike Babcock's case, it was the gold medal game in 2010. I'm not saying I quit my job because of Mike Babcock, but we sat, he's one of those guys that you sit with him. He's very motivating, and he has no time if you don't like your job, quit your job. And I remember talking to him, and he's just like, imagine not being fired up to go to work in the morning, and he's like, the life, you're thrilled, you're most motivated when you're not certain of the outcome. And I sat there and went, okay, that appeals to me, and it's scary. I don't know how this is going to play out, but I do have a lot of faith in the founders of the company. These 2 guys in Silicon Valley who are just brilliant tech guys. They're well funded too, which helps the case. But yeah, it's that thrill of trying something new.
You said you sat down with 10 coaches. Who's your favorite coach to sit down with? Obviously, Babcock, we have ties with the Red Wings.
Mike was the best, and I mean that with all due respect to all of them, because they were all great and they all gave me a lot of their time to do this. But Mike, I think we share the same sensibilities where we're trying to get better, we're trying to do new things. He's one of those guys. If you sit and say, "Hey, I'm reading this book," and he gets a pen and he's writing it down, and he'll go buy that book, or he'll have some. I mentioned listen. I don't know if you guys ever listened to the Startup podcast. It's very narrative done podcast, and I mentioned just kind of in passing with him and he's writing it down. And he's going to go listen to it, and he's just somebody that just wants to constantly learn. He's just a guy that when you're around, it was energetic, and so I enjoyed that. John Tortorella was unbelievable too, and because I didn't know John as well as some of the other coaches I sat down with, and so I was a little nervous. We've all seen John kind of go after writers in press conferences, so I kind of had a preconceived notion of how he was going to be. I've seen him, try to go after Bob Hartley in a dressing room and want to fight him. So I'm like, oh, this is, how is this going to be? And I got him in the middle of the summer. We're watching the Tampa Bay Lightning win the cup, and he was so personable, opened up about how he's treated the media. It was unbelievable to where that chapter basically I just transcribed and said, here's what John Tortorella said for 2 hours. It made my life easier. So he was great too.
Theathletic.com is the website. It's subscription based. So tell everybody what's the pricing and what kind of content can they expect when they do subscribe to theathletic.com.
It's probably something I should know, right? They ran a special today. I want to say it's like under $4 a month. And if you buy the whole year, I want to say it's under 40. And the price fluctuates. So that's why I'm not sure right now, because they're running a special because it's launch week. And I think there's a code that if you go to theathletic.com or if you follow me on Twitter, you can get the launch week code to get the 30% discount. But yeah, basically what I asked, I wrote a letter today to the fans of Detroit and just said, let's send a message to these guys in the Silicon Valley that this market wants something new, is ready to support unique storytelling, unique content, deeper analysis. And I've been amazed at people's response so far.
What's been the response?
It's been, signing up like crazy, which you just don't know until you do it, right? Like you don't know if people are going to say, and there's no way we're paying for Detroit coverage. And, and not only that, then following it up and sending an email. And I've, hundreds of words of, hey, I've been waiting for something like this for a long time. And thanks for giving us a voice. And here's who I want to read. Here's who I don't want to read. The guys, like we want to be embedded in Detroit, and these guys are like, let's, my bosses were like, let's give $1 for every subscriber to a Detroit charity, and I'm going to let the readers pick, and so people kind of giving some ideas there, and the interaction has been what's been really cool. There's people are signing up, kind of on faith because there's only been a couple stories, and we're just starting, saying we're going to support this, and then they're sharing why, and it's been awesome.
You have any idea of how many articles should people expect to see daily, weekly, that kind of thing?
Well, this week is going to be atypical because it's me, and we're bringing. There's going to be some freelancers, but
once you get everything kind of up to speed, you get all your writers.
It's going to be growing the whole time, and really the answer to that is this will grow. It's like the kind of the goldfish that keeps eating until it's depending on how big the bowl is. Like we're going to grow this as long as the subscribers keep coming, and so. The plan now is to have a writer for every major sport, and as the subs keep coming as they've been going, we'll keep on growing. But I would say this week, 10 to 15 stories, and that's going to be the low end as we get going here.
Now, as a podcast, one of the things that's been the biggest challenge for us is kind of being labeled as non-traditional media.
Yeah.
And so, to start off with us is the colleges have been very welcoming. And we talked a little bit off air about kind of, how we've been working with colleges and then the ability to get access with the pro teams. And so for you, obviously, with writing and developing a subscription-based website, are you going to have access to the professional teams? And are you going to be credentialed media? Because, websites are viewed with a little bit of, crooked eye from some PR staff.
We will be credentialed. And part of, I made sure that was the case, sat down with the Red Wings and had lunch. But part of it is having a relationship with these people a long time. I mean, they know who I am. I've been dealing with them for a long time. I've known Ken Holland a long time, been dealing with him a long. So that was easy. And when we're hiring writers, that's being able to plug them right in and have that access is going to be a part of it. Are there going to be hurdles that I don't know yet? One thing from working at ESPN is you didn't have to worry about any of this. And, people were happy ESPN was showing up at their event. And so I'm fully anticipating maybe people are nice at first and all of a sudden we criticize them and they're like, oh, we don't like the Athletic anymore. So I think there's going to be hurdles that I haven't had to deal with in the past, and we'll just kind of go as they come. So
Red Wings, obviously you have a relationship with. What about the Tigers, Lions, Pistons, other pro teams? Have they been as receptive as you would like?
I can't, without giving away who our next hires are, when those people have reached out, it's been good. So we haven't had any issues on that front.
Good to hear. I'm glad the Athletic seems to be on the up and up, and we're going to be seeing some great content from you guys.
Yeah, I hope so. It's an exciting time for I'm energized by the passion of the fans, and I'm energized by really trying to create something from the ground level here in Detroit.
Theathletic.com is the website. Craig Custance is here in studio with us, Motor City Sports Rant. Now we get a chance to pick the brain of a great hockey mind. What's going on with these Detroit Red Wings? Because right now, the news was made and it was broken, regarding the protected list. Mm-hmm. And everybody's up in arms regarding, okay, Wednesday it is. The Las Vegas Knights are going to make their picks. And the first, person that people kind of gravitated toward was, whoa, the Red Wings protected Jimmy Howard. and not Peter Mrazek. And everybody kind of was like, whoa, they flipped their lid.
Well, and this happened as I'm writing about how the Red Wings are committed to rebuilding and going younger, and they protect the older goalie, and I certainly understood the fans' reaction. I'm going to dive into this story tomorrow, but I think you can assume that from the outside, the easy thing would have been to protect the young goalie, right? If you're the Detroit Red Wings.
Absolutely.
So if they're not doing that, and they're not idiots, like I'm very comfortable ruling out that these people don't know what they're doing. Like, and I'm sure there are fans that maybe won't want to argue that point, but they're not dumb. And so there's reasons they're doing what they're doing. I think maybe part of it is they have a young goalie in Peter Mrazek that they want to see more effort out of. That perhaps if he ends up staying on the roster, and my guess is he probably will, they'll have a goalie who maybe got a bit of a wake-up call here in this.
Now, I've seen a lot of mock drafts where they have the Knights taking Peter Mrazek, but then I also see when they put out their projected lineup, he isn't even goalie 1 or goalie 2.
Right. There's a lot of good goalies available.
I see Marc-Andre Fleury, usually number 1 guy.
Yeah, Antti Ranta, Grubauer. Like there's some goalies available. Who knows? So a big part of it is going to be every GM's calling George McPhee right now. So if there's a GM that needs a goalie that likes Peter Mrazek, he's calling George McPhee and saying, take him and I'm going to trade him. Like that, the Las Vegas, their strategy is going to be not let's build the best team. It's who can we take in the expansion draft that we can then flip, because all they're trying to do right now is gather draft picks and prospects. So if they get somebody to call on Peter Mrazek, they would be more than happy to draft Peter Mrazek and then flip him. Now, I can tell you, the Red Wings have already phoned those teams before the expansion draft came out in the list, and they weren't able to trade him. So if there was a huge trade market for Peter Mrazek, my sense is that Detroit would have already done it. And I'll get with this caveat: any team that was trading for Peter Mrazek, let's say it was Friday, would have had to protect him. And I can tell you the teams that were looking at him didn't want to protect him in the expansion draft. They either had another goalie or he just wasn't the kind of guy they wanted to protect. So the difference being now, you can trade with Las Vegas. You can bring in Peter Mrazek. You don't have to worry about the expansion draft. So perhaps that opens up the market a little bit.
Now, this is the first year, the Red Wings had missed the postseason, and it kind of came to a close, an era of great success for Detroit hockey fans. But now people are wondering, and really talking about all the sports teams around town, the need potentially to rebuild versus the ability to put a competitive product on the ice. And so a lot of fans are debating back and forth the notion of tank and get high draft picks, maybe get the likes of a Connor McDavid or a superstar like the Maple Leafs, similar to them. So fans are around town, myself included, we're wondering okay, what is the value in continuing potentially to have that streak go on versus, maybe just sacrifice and have some lean years, and then you get those multiple top 5 draft picks, and then you go forward. What is your take on the whole notion of, rebuilding versus tanking?
Yeah, I love this debate, and I've had it ad nauseum with people, with fans, with management, with Ken Holland, and I wrote about it today because I don't think there's a right answer. And my inclination in covering the last 10 Stanley Cup Finals is you need a Sidney Crosby or you need Jonathan Taves. You look at every one of those teams, they have that guy that's at the top of the draft. And I don't know any other way to get a guy other than tanking. And so maybe it's too simplistic, but I think Detroit is unique. And this would be the Red Wings argument against tanking, is that they have spent decades building a culture of winning in Detroit. And the moment you start stripping things down and you're shipping players out, you're sending a message that it's okay to not try to compete. And all that lineage that started with Steve Yzerman, that got passed down to Lidstrom, that's now with Zetterberg, that goes away. And I can see examples of that. You see it in Colorado. That team is now tanking for the second time. And they got Nathan McKinnon and Landeskog and Matt Duchene, and it didn't work. Now they're going to trade Matt Duchene, and they're going to try to, they were the worst team by far, got the 4th pick. It's a disaster. And those, how far away do those Avalanche teams feel from, the Red Wings rivalry days? That's from a whole nother time. I think the Devils, they've lost, the same thing. They stripped it down, they're building, and again, maybe it works out great for the Devils. And, but those are the contemporaries for the Red Wings, and the Red Wings are very consciously doing it different. And so what I wrote today is here's what exactly has to happen right in order to rebuild on the fly, which has just as many questions about than tanking does. But it's a great debate. and I certainly can see both sides of it. What I don't know is how much appetite fans would truly have for the Red Wings being bad. If they strip it down and it's that new arena is a bad product for the next 5 years, are Red Wings fans still okay with it at that point? I think the savvy ones are, because they can sit there. They'll know who's coming in the draft. They'll know, hey, the payoff, this works. But not every fan has that mentality. They just want to go to on a Saturday night and go watch the Red Wings play and have something on the line.
So what do the Red Wings need to do to really build up their, the AHL teams, build up the bullpen? So taking it back, because I think one of the things that the Red Wings really excelled at back in the 90s when they were getting real good is that they had that talent scouting. They were over in Europe and they found Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg and finding all those guys and drafting crazy late. But now everyone has that. So how do the Red Wings, if they aren't going to tank, how do they just build that back up?
So I wrote about today, they have this reputation of being this great drafting team, this great draft and development team, and the reality is they've gone dry especially at center and on defense. They're not drafting the Lidstroms, the Zetterbergs, and the Datsyuks late. What they would argue, and there's some validity to this, is you counter that with quantity. So you may not get a top 3 pick, but if you start collecting draft picks and you have 3 second-round picks, hopefully those good players are still available. You look at the Nashville Predators, the way their D is set up, there's not a number 1 pick in that group. These are all end of the first, second-round picks. And so I think they would argue we're gonna just try to load up on picks and hope that, rather than tank, we can hit in the second round, we can hit in the third round. Where those players are available, you just have to do it.
One of the things that, people explore and debate is the whole notion of having a salary cap. Here in Detroit, we were lush with funds and we were able to go out there and build a super team. For those that are, knowing that word and liking it, the Wings built a super team.
They did.
And it's now a salary cap era, which puts a lot more pressure on guys like Kenny Holland to put together a team. And where if you make a mistake, you're punished potentially for several seasons. Are you a fan of the salary cap? Do you feel like it's made the league more competitive or less now, because you kind of see the same kind of teams with great general managers doing some things?
Yeah. What's happened is it's completely leveled the playing field. And it's almost the opposite of the NBA, where you go into the playoffs and you're like, okay, it's going to be this team versus that team, and you just know it. Whereas the NHL playoffs, even the regular season, the days of there being 2 great teams are long gone. And I'm inclined to think that's probably good for the product, and you want fans in every city to think they have a shot. Where I think it presents challenges for teams like Detroit or the others that are able to spend their way out of it. Where I think there's an opportunity is, and I think Toronto does a really good job of this, is they take their money that they might have spent on players and now they're really pouring in it. Like if you look at the Maple Leafs front office, it's loaded. There's 1 million people and they've got an analytics staff that's, they've got Lou Lamoriello and Shanahan and all these guys and the Hunters, and they brought in everything you could possibly bring into a front office. And that would be, that would be one thing if I was running the Red Wings, and whether or not you're tanking or you're trying to rebuild on the fly, I would say, look, we have the Ilitch's money here, and we're not, we can't outspend on our salary cap, but we can bring in maybe a full-on analytics staff and whatever it is, and try to find some edge, even if it's incremental, and build out your front office that way. And they would argue, they do that on some level in Grand Rapids. They've got a pretty big staff there, and it's not like they're not spending money, but I would just blow it. I would put so much money into development in the front office.
Little Caesars Arena is going to do wonders. Are you excited to potentially get in there and see what everyone's talking about? Because from everybody that's been in there, they've done a lot of great media tours. Everybody that's in there has just been like, wow, they have really put together something that the fans of Detroit, the media, are all going to say, oh my goodness, look what we've built here, Little Caesars Arena. It
looks great, and I've been out of town a couple of times. They had the kind of the media tours, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think this town is ready for it. I mean, I love Joe Louis Arena. Unbelievable memories there. I grew up in this area, but by the end, you're like, okay, you're trying to compete with these teams that have unbelievable arenas. If you're trying to hit in free agency, which the Red Wings would like, I'm sure there's some targets down the road of high end free agents. You have to have that, and I am excited to see it. And not for nothing, and none of your listeners care at all about this, but the press box was brutal at Joe Louis.
And that I was actually just about to ask you. The media box at Joe Louis is essentially just a bar with some high chairs.
With those
you
high
get
chairs,
some
yeah.
popcorn and maybe some pop. Is there another media box around the NHL that's worse than that?
No. I'm trying to think. There's one, I think it's Calgary, that has the crazy catwalk, but that you have to walk over. But no, the Joe Louis. Not only that, so you're sitting in those high chairs, and you're just getting, anytime anyone walks by, you're getting bumped in the back. And there was always that seat that had like the column where you had even less area to work. And I always felt like if I wrote something they didn't like, I got put in that spot, even though it was all in my head and I imagined it all. And I remember one night, Scotty Bowman got that seat, and I'm sitting here going, here's the greatest coach of all time, and he's in the hump seat, and the Joe, people are hitting him in the back, and finally Scotty put up with that for like 5 minutes, and was like, he found a much better
go to
spot.
a suite.
Yeah, he's like, I'm Scotty Bowman.
Besides Detroit, what rinks have you enjoyed and just been like, wow, mesmerized by being in, a great NHL city and a great facility?
Montreal's unbelievable, and the kind of their pre-game and the atmosphere leading up to games and what they're able to do is out of this world. I get chills going to Montreal, Madison Square Garden. I mean, I'm just answering the regulars, but they're legends for a reason.
It's
I
like
love
going to the
games.
big house in Michigan.
Exactly. And Red Wings fans won't like this, but I love covering games in Chicago and the anthem where they're cheering. And
You like the anthem with the cheering?
I like the anthem with the cheering. You're not a fan.
I don't like the cheering.
All right.
It's okay. It's all good. We can have the debate. I'm just not a fan of it. It's weird. I went there for a pregame, and everyone just starts going.
Yeah. They start clapping, and it gets a little louder. and I don't know. I get chills when, especially in the Cup Finals, where the fans are totally into it. I love covering games in Chicago. And the one thing my regret about leaving ESPN is I left right before the Stanley Cup Finals. So the Eastern Conference Final was the last thing I was on the road for, just because of the timing of my contract. And not being able to go to Nashville, like that looked like it was unbelievable to see Broadway and the fans spilling out. It's really fun to see a non-traditional market get caught up the way that Nashville did and get recognized for just how good those fans are there.
From watching that finals, Nashville, Pittsburgh, I think Nashville got a raw deal. Because it seemed like Pittsburgh was doing just enough to not lose.
Right.
And they got all the best breaks. And to win the Stanley Cups the way that they did on the bouncing goal off the goalie's back.
If I hadn't witnessed Pittsburgh do that for the 3 previous rounds, I might say if I'm a Nashville fan, you have a complete gripe, but I was on the Penguins from day one against Columbus, and they against Washington was a better team, outplayed them almost every night. I felt like to the point where you felt bad for the Capitals because you're like, what else? They would outshoot them by 20 shots, and then Sidney Crosby would set up Phil Kessel and they would win, and to me, this run the Penguins went on, and again, Detroit fans don't want to hear this, but showed just the will of Sidney Crosby. And it's hard in hockey for one player to make a big difference, but he single-handed, he put that team on his back and made sure they
Does he deserve all the hate that everyone gives him?
I got to be careful because I want Detroit people to subscribe to The Athletic. Please do. Sidney Crosby, I think a lot of it has to do with stuff from earlier in his career. I mean, the complaining, the handshake with Detroit. I'm sure if he could do it over again, he would hustle a little bit more to get in that line. But I think Sidney Crosby has matured into a player that I think if you're just a fan of hockey at this point in his career, it might, just enjoy watching. He's great. He's to me a top 5 player.
I mean, I'm surprised he even really finished out the playoffs. I mean, once he took that headshot, I was gosh, he's done.
Yeah, to the point where you had I always felt uncomfortable. You don't want to praise him because you're like, boy, is this even smart, right? Like here's a guy with a concussion history, and he's refused to leave the lineup. And when you would talk to him about it, he would say, look, I mean, you guys can question all you want, but who knows my body better than me? And I'm not going to do anything stupid here. But I'm with you. Like when I saw those hits, I'm like, oh man, like we may not see Sid again, and he just kept on going. And it took him a while to get going in terms of his on-ice play, but you saw he got it back at the end of that series and just kept on going.
Craig Custance, kind enough to spend an hour with us, sharing stories about his work great career in journalism, now launching a new venture, theathletic.com. I want to get you out of here on this. I know it's a tough question, but obviously the biggest challenge that I think you may have being online is trolls. What do you think is the best way for you, or how have you handled it? What do you think for young journalists and those in the field? What's the best way to handle trolls?
I like to interact with people. So, and I always, it's like sometimes I find that the people that are angriest end up coming around and end up being an advocate for you. Now, that's to a point. Like if somebody is ugly or personal, or like you can tell right away, like there's no reasoning with this person, right? But like if you're mad about something I wrote or you disagreed, I like to engage and let's debate this, and sometimes it never ends, right? It's a string of Twitter messages, and you're like, oh, there's nothing I can say here that's going to end this conversation. But other times they're like, okay, yeah, and they want to be heard, and so I would say, you know, if it's really ugly, there's no point in engaging it. But don't be afraid to engage with someone that has a different opinion than you.
You can follow Craig on Twitter at Craig Custance. You can follow The Athletic on Twitter at The Athletic, DET, all one word. Definitely everybody out there, go subscribe to theathletic.com, because if you want true independent journalism and you want people to succeed and you want more of this, then you have to show support. So we're fully behind, subscription-based models, obviously, here at the podcast. So if you're listening to this, go check out theathletic.com. You just hit that subscribe button at the top, and I'm almost certain, without having read your work just yet, to know that, you can find great quality content. You can tell that you've put a lot of thought to this and that you're ready to kind of change the field. And we have great respect for those that try and do that. And we wish you the utmost respect and the utmost good luck in terms of, changing people's perceptions and trying to really make it doing something alternative in the world of journalism. So I give you great respect for trying it. And I have a good feeling, just based upon the time we spent, that you're going to have a good chance, a good fair shot at some good success.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Time flew by, but thanks, Craig, for coming by. I look forward to reading your stuff, but that'll do it for this episode. For Craig, John, I am Jason. See you next week.
Okay, nice, idiot. F you. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.